All right, it's good to see all of you tonight showing up. And we have a special speaker. And so, what I'm going to do, as usual, is I will open in prayer and then I will introduce Ambassador Ettinger, who at this congregation probably doesn't need much introduction because y'all have heard him several times. And some of you have heard him even when you were on trips in Israel. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father God, we're so thankful that we have this opportunity to have someone of the stature of Yoram here to inform us about what's going on in Israel and the Middle East. And we know how important it is for us as believers to be praying for Israel and to be supportive of Israel, and because they are still your chosen people. And so, Father, we're just thankful for this time, and we pray this in Christ's name. Amen. All right. Yoram, in the late 80s, from what was it, 86 to 89? 85 to 89, was the Consul General for Israel in Houston, Texas. And so he has a lot of friends here from that time period that he has kept in contact with, and Yoram comes to Houston about 2 or 3 times a year. We have breakfast just about every time he's here, and when I'm in Israel with the tour group, we always have breakfast together at least once, and he usually speaks to our tour groups at least once. And he was talking this morning at breakfast about how he was when he was Consul General here, how he was instrumental in making contact and developing a relationship with a key player in the Texas Republican Party who was not especially pro-Israel before he met Yoram, and he certainly was after he met Yoram, and that was instrumental in shifting the orientation of the Texas Republican Party to be very strongly pro-Israel. And so if you'll notice, we both have on lapel pins that feature the 2 Lone Star State flags. So I asked Yoram to speak and tell us about what's going on in Jordan and what's going on in Syria and what's going on in Turkey and what's going on in the Gaza Strip and what's going on in Iran. And he said he would need 12 hours to do that. So we'll see if he runs out of gas before then. I think he will, but he'll give us some great insights into what is going on. I don't know. I'm sure there are 1 or 2 that may be more informed than he is, but it's not by much, and there's very few of them. He is exceptionally well informed and has an incredible memory. And I have seen him stand up and just teach for over an hour and without a note in front of him. So I'm always pleased to have my good friend. We've been friends now for about 17 years, I think, going back to about 2009. So glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's my privilege and my pleasure to be here again with Pastor Robbie and the congregation. And I'll start with Israel, as I see it today, and it fits Texas also, because just like the Texas state of mind, so we in Israel, we don't get off the horse precisely when the horse is bucking. And the horse has been bucking at least since October 2023. And in my humble mind, anyone who observes Israel during that period of time cannot be but very, very optimistic about Israel today and about the future of Israel. If we go back to October 7, October 8, 2023, there were many, maybe even most commentators who developed doubts about the capability of Israel to survive the pressure in the Middle East. There were all sorts of commentaries about high-tech companies relocating away from Israel to the U.S., to some countries in Europe, and there were talks about some very wealthy people that supposedly transferred their money, their rich accounts to overseas banks. And here we are about 2.5 years later, and we're talking about 2025 as the all-time high year of overseas investments in Israel. Not only all-time high, but all-time high by far compared to the runner-up for being the best year for overseas investment. Most investors happen to be Americans, American high-tech corporations, American investment banks, and American individuals who choose to invest in Israel. Very shortly after the war broke up, about 2-3 months later, one of America's leading philanthropists, billionaires who has endowed billions of dollars to American campuses, Bill Ackman, came to Israel with his wife, and they announced that they are investing in the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. And people were very astounded. Why would they come to Israel a few months into the war, where so many doubts about Israel's future, so many uncertainties dominated the headlines of the media? And the response by Bill Ackman was that he studied the track record of Israel following each war, following each wave of terrorism, and the conclusion, he said, was very clear. After every wave of terrorism, after every war, there is a very substantial surge of the Israeli economy. And the reason also is very, very clear, and I would say logical. War, if you approach it constructively, not in a fatalistic or pessimistic manner, war breeds innovations, because you have to overcome adversity, and the best way to overcome adversity is to develop new applications, new ways of operating different equipment and different military systems. And like most defense application and systems, they are dual use type of systems, namely they also apply to the non-military, to the commercial market. Going back to Bill Ackman, he came back to Israel with his wife a few months ago, and there was a press conference, and he announced that he made 280% on his investments shortly after the war broke up. And once again, he reiterated that he was very confident of Israel's capabilities to overcome adversity. He knew that there are new applications around the corner. Why not invest when they are at relatively low valuation? Why wait until their value is rising in the market? And he was right, and he hasn't been the only one. We're talking about Israel, where our currency, the shekel, the strength vis-a-vis in compared to the dollar was roughly 4 shekels or slightly less than 4 shekels per dollar. Today, it's 3 shekels per dollar. And one of the reasons is the flow of dollars to the country through investment. And just like any other commodity, there is supply and demand. When the supply of dollar exceeds all expectations, obviously the value compared to the shekel declines. But this is one of the many, many indications of the strength of the Israeli economy in defiance of adversity. We're talking about very critical element of any economy, the ratio of national debt to gross domestic product. One would have expected that that ratio would skyrocket due to the expenditures with regard to the war. Trillions of shekels have been invested by Israel in this war, but the ratio of national debt to gross domestic product has remained more or less the same, 69%. To put 69% ratio in perspective, the US ratio of national debt to gross domestic product is 120%. Ours is one of the lowest among the industrialized nations. The gross domestic product per capita in Israel today is higher than most European countries. And we don't need to elaborate. European countries do not face war on 7 fronts as we have faced. And certainly our defense industry has zoomed upward dramatically as far as exports. The war has been conducted with the world watching the performance of the Israeli military, while we are privileged to use a number of very critical advanced American military systems. Most of the systems employed by the Israeli Defense Forces are made in Israel, and as a result of the effective use by Israel, we have seen 2025, again, all-time high level of exports of Israeli defense products. We have developed our natural gas resources, once again, very high level of exports. About a year and a half ago, a very substantial deal was concluded with Egypt, some $30 billion agreement of Israel exporting natural gas to Egypt. Those are natural gas resources which are in the Mediterranean. The bottom line is that, again, as I started, just like or consistent with the spirit of Texas, the can-do mentality, the defiance of odds, so has Israel conducted itself in the current war against adversity. And we don't need to elaborate here about the adversity coming from, in my mind, many, many unexpected circles or sectors of the American society. Europe, it's almost a hopeless case over there. And the fact is that we have survived. There are cases of European countries that cannot stop, do not stop condemning us, but at the same time, they seek and acquire Israeli products, commercial and military, realizing that when it comes to health product, agricultural product, certainly when it comes to military products, it's much better to have Israeli products on hand, and this has been their walk in contrast to their talk, very negative talk about Israel. I would like to move from here to something which is also very contemporary. In a few days, Jews will celebrate the holiday of Purim. And the holiday of Purim happens to be very relevant to the current war against Iran. As we know, Iran features very prominently in the scroll of Esther, which is the story, the chronicles of Purim. And there is one guy who features there, and this is Haman. And Haman is related, by the way, to this week's portion of the Torah, which Jews study or read in synagogues, in temples. And Haman was called Haman the Agagi. Agag was the king of the Amalekites. And in this week portion, or adjacent to portion, we have what is called the Haftarah from the book of Samuel, and we encounter Samuel instructing King Saul to kill King Agag, the Amalekite. And the reason that he instructed him to kill the king was very logical. He told him, the king of the Amalekites, just like the Amalekites, is mandated by his most fundamental values and ideology to eliminate, to obliterate all Jews. He is not an ordinary enemy, and therefore do not have mercy on him, do not negotiate with him, you have to kill him. King Saul did not heed the advice, and he spared the life of King Agag. One of his descendants was Haman, and subsequently King Saul himself was killed in the battlefield. We can go back a few weeks as far as the portion of the Torah, and we see another confrontation between the Jews led by Moses and Pharaoh. Pharaoh chariots were chasing the Jews, and they drowned in the sea. But when we follow the Chronicles, we do not see in the Bible, in the Torah, in the books, 5 books of Moses, we don't see any reference to obliterate Pharaoh, obliterate the Egyptians. It doesn't exist there. It doesn't exist. It exists only in one case, and that's the Amalekite. And the reason, again, their most fundamental values, fundamental intrinsic ideology, which requires them, mandates them to eliminate all Jews. I'll open very long parenthesis here, because the Iranians, going back to the Shah, unlike the current Islamic regime, but going back to the Shah, they claimed to be Aryans. So did Nazi Germany. They claimed to be Aryans. I mention that because it sounds very personal, but it is not. Upon the decision of our oldest daughter to get married, we invited the future son-in-law and his family to welcome the Sabbath in our apartment. And they came along with our son-in-law's grandfather, who was a Holocaust survivor. He survived the Holocaust at the age of 17. And over the Sabbath table, he told us that he was part of a group which was prepared to arrive later on to the land of Israel. And they were accommodated on a ranch where they received all the instructions ahead of arrival to the land of Israel. And they found out that the ranch was the ranch of Julius Streicher. Julius Streicher was the propaganda minister of the Nazis. He was one of the 10 Nazi leaders who were hung after the Nuremberg trials. And he told us, the grandparents of our future son-in-law, that one day he was curious to find out what was in the attic on the ranch over there. He entered the attic and he was astounded. Huge library. So he started going through the books and he found that there was something very strange. In almost every book, there were a few sentences written in red. And when he started going over the underlined red passages, he found out all of them referred to the holiday of Purim and to Haman. At which point I said, Grandpa Eliezer, that was his name, wait a second, because I have in our apartment a photocopy of a page from Newsweek magazine from the Nuremberg trials. And the reporter covered the hanging of the 10 major Nazi criminals, and he reported each one walking towards the gallows. And then he said something strange happened. Julius Streicher walked towards the gallows and he yelled, "This is Purim Fest 1946. Now, obviously, it seems that the reporter didn't know exactly the connection that Julius Streicher had in mind, but it made the underlined passages very, very clear. Julius Streicher studied history, and he all the time was concerned that he might end up just like the 10 sons of Haman who were hung. So we have 10 sons of Haman who were hung. We have 10 Nazi leaders who were hung. And if you want to add another element here, there was one major Nazi leader who committed suicide, Goering, whose wife smuggled him cyanide, I believe, and he swallowed it and he committed suicide. If you read interpretations of the scroll of Esther, you find out that there was another child of Haman who committed suicide. His daughter, he had one daughter, and when she saw the humiliation and the end of her father and her 10 brothers, she decided to commit suicide, joining their own fate. I mentioned that in relevance to Iran because there are too many people who delude themselves that negotiation with Iran could produce a positive outcome, better than the 2015 agreement concluded by Obama. They ignore not only the history of Iran, but they ignore something very critical. And this is that the Jewish state has been successful to conclude 6 peace treaties with 6 Arab countries: Egypt, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and South Sudan. The fact is that while we concluded 6 peace treaties with 6 Arab countries, we have been unable to conclude peace treaty with the Palestinians, irrespective of the fact that there were dozens, if not well over 100, attempts by Israelis, by Americans, by Europeans, by the UN. The proof is in the pudding. And the pudding is that there is no peace treaty between us and the Palestinians. There is no peace treaty between us and Hamas or us and the PLO. There is no peace treaty between us and Hezbollah. And there is no peace treaty between Israel and the Ayatollah regime. And the difference between the 6 Arab countries and the regime of the Ayatollah or Hamas or PLO or Hezbollah is very clear. You don't have to be Middle East scientists for that. It's very clear because none of the 6 Arab countries follow or are mandated by their national ideology to eliminate the Jewish state. I have no doubt that they would rather have Middle East without a sovereign Jewish state. But they are not mandated to do that by their ideology, by their vision, by their values. And therefore, they can conclude peace treaty with Israel. Moreover, it's very beneficial for them. They did not conclude peace treaty because they woke up one morning and said, wow, the Jews really want peace. No, they concluded peace treaty because that peace treaty has served their interest. We don't have peace treaty with Saudi Arabia, but we have very, very productive defense relations, very productive technological relations, irrigation, agriculture, planning cooperation. And the reason we have such advanced cooperation with Saudi Arabia without peace treaty is for obvious reason. The Saudis regard Israel as one of the very few, maybe the only, credible ally in the face of mutual threats, the Ayatollah regime and the Muslim Brotherhood, both of which have their machete at the throat of the House of Saud, the throat of the United Arab Emirates, at the throat of Bahrain, of Jordan, of Egypt, of Morocco. And they look around and they ask themselves, whom can we trust in the face of Iran's Ayatollah or the Muslim Brotherhood? Sometimes they can trust the United States. Sometimes, depends on who is the president. The Europeans, they don't count on them at all. They are very realistic, and they know that the Europeans, long time ago, lost their will to flex a muscle, and I'm not sure that there is any muscle left in Europe in the face of Islamic terrorism and other threats. They cannot trust fellow Arabs because each Arab country is facing those machetes at their own throat. There's only one country which they know, whether led by a left of center coalition, right of center coalition, among the very few points where there is consensus in Israel, is the realization that the Ayatollah regime, the Muslim Brotherhood, they are lethal threats. The left feels that way, the right feels that way, and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia knows on a rainy day he can count on Israel to help or snatch him from the jaws of the Ayatollah regime. On the other hand, when one talks about, for instance, Hamas or the PLO, the two major Palestinian segments, they are mandated by their vision, by their so-called constitution charters, to eliminate the Jewish state. We hear those slogans, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. From the river to the sea leaves no room for a Jewish state. But this is a punchy summation of the charter of the PLO and the charter of Hamas. And by the way, the PLO charter goes back to 1964. Israel did not reunite Jerusalem in 1964. It took place in 1967. Israel did not return to Judea and Samaria in 1964. So what exactly were they going to liberate when they specified in their charter liberation of Palestine? They were going to liberate what they call the occupation of 1948. The mere existence of Israel. Hamas, similarly, 1978, they published their constitution, which mandates them to eliminate Israel, likewise Hezbollah, and likewise the parent company of Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, going back to 1928. The Muslim Brotherhood is committed by its own charter, by its own character, to eliminate every single national Muslim regime, to establish a universal Muslim society ruled by the Quran, and they add, as the only legitimate religion on earth, as a divinely ordained religion. And then turn on the so-called infidel West and eliminate the infidel West. The Ayatollah regime has never been secretive about its own ideology. It's in their constitution of 1979, which they published right after taking over control of Iran in February of 79. And their constitution literally is based on a 1,400-year-old ideology, going back to the 7th century, where the initial stage of the Shiite-Sunni rift came to being. And the Ayatollah regime is committed to avenge what they call the Sunni betrayal of the Shiites. And they're committed, therefore, to topple every single what they call apostate Sunni regime, and then turn to the infidel West, and especially the great American Satan. It's in their constitution, it's in their school curriculum, it's in their official media, it's in their government control mosque, where they espouse that ideology every single Friday through the mosque sermons, and certainly it has been expressed by their own policy. From the American policemen of the Gulf until the Ayatollah regime took over, they have transformed Iran into the lead epicenter of anti-US terrorism, anti-US drug trafficking, anti-US money laundering, anti-US proliferation of advanced military systems, and they haven't kept it in the Persian Gulf area. They haven't limited it only to the Middle East or only to parts of Africa. Beginning in 1980, the Ayatollah regime started to entrench itself throughout Latin America, from southern Chile all the way to the US-Mexico border, and increasingly, gradually, on US soil in the form of growing network of sleeper cells. The threat assessment for 2025 by the FBI, Homeland Security Department, and the Director of Intelligence, 3 of those agencies indicated in their threat assessment the presence of sleeper cells controlled by Iran in the US in cooperation with Russia and China. When President Trump conducted the operation in Venezuela, he dealt a major blow to the most important Iranian beachhead in Latin America. Venezuela was, until the recent operation, the Iranian outpost in what they call in Iran, what they call the soft underbelly of the United States. The Iranians, by the way, are very, very sophisticated in... Oh, I apologize, I'm just turning off, I didn't... It's really Iran. But anyway, they are very sophisticated, and they are familiar with global issues, and they know very well how weak the US can be in Latin America with large number of anti-American governments. And as a result, since 1980, they have developed very tight collaboration with every single anti-US government in Latin America. They have developed very strong cooperation with each drug cartel, especially in Mexico, but also in Colombia and Bolivia and Brazil. They have provided the drug cartel with equipment to construct underground tunnels in order to smuggle into the US through California and Arizona and New Mexico and Texas terrorist and drugs. And certainly, they have established terrorist training camp, which they excel in, mostly in the tri-border area of Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil, and another tri-border area, Chile and Bolivia and Peru. They chose the tri-border area because those areas for decades have been lawless areas, and they have established themselves very deeply there, especially in the area of drug trafficking and money laundering. Assessments of the money laundering has reached $2 to $3 billion every single year. Terrorists trained in the training camps, some of them remained in Latin America, were smuggled into the US or transferred to the Middle East. The operation by Iran in Latin America and on US soil have been conducted with Hezbollah terrorists. And the reason it has been conducted with Hezbollah terrorists has to do with the fact that there is a large number of Lebanese immigrants who reached Central and South America, many of them Shiites, some of them extremely successful, and some are prone to cooperate, collaborate with Hezbollah and with Iran. Hezbollah and Iran have had a history of collaboration. You can go back to 1983 when 2 car bombs in Beirut were activated jointly by Iran, Hezbollah, and Palestinian terrorists. 1 car bomb hit the US Embassy, another one hit the Marine headquarters. Total fatalities were 270 Americans murdered in those 2 car bombs, where Hezbollah and Iran featured very prominently. And then later on, in 1998, 2 more car bombs hit, one the American embassy in Tanzania, one the American embassy in Kenya, and once again, result of collaboration between Hezbollah and the Ayatollah regime. When it comes to the delusion that one can collaborate them, one can negotiate with them, it takes someone to disassociate himself or herself from reality to assume that you can negotiate. And the problem has to do with the Western approach, which assumes that the world thinks like Westerners. And when you have a disagreement, you have a conflict, you sit down and you negotiate. And you reach certain compromise, you meet halfway, you meet, if you're lucky, 75% of what you have in mind. But why fight if we can negotiate? When Westerners negotiate with the Ayatollah regime or with Hamas or with Hezbollah, they approach negotiation according to Webster Dictionary. And it basically tells you negotiation is a step towards reconciliation, is a step which avoids bloodshed, and it's preferable to war. However, the Ayatollah regime has a different dictionary, and their dictionary specifies that negotiation is a means to lick wounds, such as the June 2025 war. It's an opportunity or a step to stall for time in order to restore capabilities with the help of China and North Korea and Russia, which are eager to restore the capabilities of Iran, because what Israel did in June, disabling the air defenses and the Iranian Air Force, was not only a blow to Iran, it was a blow to the reputation of China and Russia and North Korea, which were behind the military capabilities of Iran. And those air defenses which Israel disabled completely, highlighting or revealing their weaknesses are deployed by China and Russia in other parts of the world, and by identifying their weaknesses and sharing it, as we have done with the United States, we certainly have dealt a major blow to the strategic posture, to the posture of deterrence of China and Russia, which are eager to restore their posture of deterrence. But the attempt to negotiate with Iran plays into the hands of China and Russia and the Ayatollah regime. When it comes to stalling for time, they're also very astute, as I said, and they know very well the nuances of the American political system. And they know that the midterm elections are around the corner, and midterm election could go either way. And there is a possibility that one or two chambers will change power. And rather than Republican majority, it could become Democratic majority. And I would say even if it's one chamber, it's going to make the maneuverability of the president much, much more difficult than it is today, which again plays into their hands. And the more time they can stall, the closer they get to November, and it plays into their hands. And therefore we keep hearing the Iranians saying, well, we seem to agree on most points. However, we need to examine it during the next 2 weeks. And then there will be 10 more days, and then there will be maybe 3 more weeks. And all this time you would have elements in the US, they say, why give up a chance for resolving the conflict without war, not realizing that the ideology of the Ayatollah regime does not lend itself to peaceful coexistence. Not with Saudi Arabia, not with the UAE, not with Bahrain, not with any Sunni Arab country, certainly not with any so-called infidel country. Anyone who thinks otherwise certainly dwells upon reality, which is much more convenient, much more comforting than the reality which we face in the Middle East, but that's an alternate reality. And if you shape your policy based on alternate reality, you are undermining your own position, and you provide tailwind to your arch enemies. And what we see in Gaza is a miniature of the issue of Iran. We have Hamas that follows this ideology. We have Hamas that was engaged 6 times in war and negotiation before October 2023. And once again, Hamas is a party to negotiation, as if we are decided to learn from history by repeating rather than avoiding mistakes. And certainly, when you talk about Hamas, which is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, you're talking about an entity which constitutes a threat to every single pro-American Arab regime. Should Hamas remain in Gaza, should Hamas be spared of obliteration, it is going to provide major tailwind to every single anti-American Islamic terror organization. Because for Hamas to remain in Gaza against all odds, let's face it, would be a dramatic achievement. And such dramatic achievement would charge the batteries of every single anti-American element in the Middle East and would make the machete at the throat of all allies of America that much closer to cutting that throat. How is Israel connected to all that? It seems to me we saw it, we witnessed it in June. In June of last year, Israel conducted an air offensive against Iran on June 13, disabling air defenses and the American Air Force and the Iranian Air Force, carried out another week of bombing of critical targets in Iran, which enabled the US to bomb 3 critical nuclear facilities on June 21st, unimpeded by Iranian air defenses or Iranian Air Force. No other ally of the US could have provided the US with such a service. And as I mentioned before, it was not limited only to Iran, but exposing the weakness of Chinese and Russian air defenses has had a global impact, providing the US with robust tailwind and facing China and Russia with very, very severe headwind. The Israeli air offensive was conducted with 200 American-made combat aircraft, which we received complement of USA. However, conducting that air offensive, we performed as the most important showroom of the American aerospace industry, demonstrating to the world the clear advantage of American combat aircraft over Chinese and Russian and British and French and Italian or any other country which manufactures combat aircraft. Being a showroom means impacting exports. And when it comes to exports, for instance, of the American F-35, we can go back to 2018, when Israel was the first country to receive the F-35 for operational use. Not only did we receive it for operational use, but we received it in defiance of top experts in this country, some in Israel, who suggested that this is a total failure. And they declared the F-35 program as doomed to fail, and billions of dollars are doomed to go down the drain. By the way, I thought it was something else, but they report here that a child was kidnapped in the area. No, I thought something else, because this is the sound of the siren in Israel, so I thought that something is going on in Iran, but it's local. Anyway, in 2018, the top experts already eulogized the F-35 program, but by 2019, a year later, Israel, together with the manufacturer Lockheed Martin, solved, if not all, most of the technical and mechanical glitches of the F-35, And again, the proof has been in the pudding. Moreover, if you look at the export chart in Lockheed Martin publications, you find out from 2019, exports zoom upward. And then if you observe around the world, only one country using F-35 has used it literally on a daily basis in an intensity which is second to none, way, way ahead of any other country, because no other country has had the challenges forcing Israel to resort to the F-35. And as a result, we're talking about mega billion dollars revenue to the manufacturer, complement largely of the Israeli showroom. According to Lockheed Martin, 2025, $40 billion exports of F-35 alone. I don't claim that all of the $40 billion is due to Israeli Air Force. But I would say conservatively, 50% is a pretty conservative assessment in view of the fact that we are the most intense or the only intense user of the F-35. And this is $40 billion compared to $3.8 billion, which erroneously is referred to as foreign aid. And we have heard recently, why should we give Israel money? And people who say that demonstrate ignorance of the highest degree, because Israel doesn't get even a cent from the USA. Israel doesn't get money. The US Pentagon issues or extends credit for Israel to buy American only. And Israel is using that credit to buy from Lockheed and Boeing and Northrop Grumman and many, many other defense manufacturers. We do not receive any money in Israel. But more than that, this is an investment which enables Israel to use the American hardware in a position of being the #1 battle-tested laboratory of the United States. Battle-tested means that every single day we produce lessons. Those lessons are transferred, lessons because of the intense use of the plane, which no country in the world goes through such intense use. And we share it with the manufacturer, and according to the manufacturers, this has saved Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and many others. We are using dozens of American military systems, probably well over 100. Each one of them we use as a battle-tested laboratory, and we save anywhere between 10 and 20 years of research and development cost. What does it mean in American dollars? You can take the cost, research and development cost of the F-35, and total cost has been $55 billion. When you save 10 to 20 years in the context of $55 billion for one of those combat aircraft, you're talking about mega billion dollars. And to put again in perspective, $40 billion export last year by Lockheed Martin, but according to Lockheed Martin, in the pipeline, we're talking about $173 billion. And again, I don't claim that everything is because of Israel, but one cannot ignore the dominant role played by Israel being the most intense user and being a battle-tested laboratory which upgrades the capabilities of the plane almost on a daily basis because of the lessons which we derive and we share. We share with the manufacturer. There is another element obviously here, because the more you manufacture, the more you export, the more you employ. And when you look at the program of F-35, since Israel received it, the scope of employment of the F-35 has been expanded by 35%. Today, 290,000 individuals are employed in the program of the F-35, and that includes the manufacturers, Lockheed Martin, and the many subcontractors. Now, this is not only employment, but when you produce revenues for the manufacturer, for the corporates involved, you also generate corporate income tax, which is a nice income to the US government. You generate personal income tax of those 290,000 employees. And again, Israel plays a key role in generating that income tax revenue. And if you combine the corporate income tax and the individual income tax of 290,000 individuals, you come to about $3 billion annual income tax revenues resulting from this battle-tested laboratory, otherwise known as the State of Israel. This does not conclude the contributions made by Israel, because as we saw in June, as I trust we'll see in the next few days or next few weeks, the Israeli intelligence has played a key role in facilitating American operation against Iran. We proved it very clearly in June of last year. We proved it in the previous offensive, which was in October 2024. And we have provided the US with multitude of intelligence data. And the reason is very clear. With all due respect to the CIA is in the American continent. We are there at the region which is the epicenter of anti-American Islamic terrorism. And we have a different demography than the US. The Israeli demography is amenable to very, very specific intelligence capabilities, because many of the Israelis can blend easily into any Arab Muslim country in the Middle East. And blending provides also much information. Back in 2018, Mossad was able to penetrate an Islamic terrorist unit in Syria, which developed means to insert explosives into laptop in a way which could bypass security facilities in civilian airport. Israel preempted, shared it with the Americans, with the Europeans, and certainly a major calamity was spared, because one can only imagine what would be the outcome if American Airlines, United, Southwest, Frontier, and other planes blow up in the air because of those explosives inserted into laptops. And what would happen if even on the ground laptops would explode in civilian airport? What would be the impact on the psyche of Americans? All of which was spared by the Israeli intelligence. Can one monetize such contribution? I think one can monetize it if you resort to what was stated years ago by a former chief of Air Force intelligence, General George Keegan. He was interviewed by the New York Times, and when he was asked, why are you so enthusiastic about intelligence cooperation with Israel? His response was, if the U.S. were to procure on its own the intelligence received from Israel, then the U.S. would have to establish 5 CIAs. And I'm willing to assume that he exaggerated. And it's not 5, it's not 4, not even 2, only 1. But some people here may know that the annual budget of the CIA is around $15 billion. Now, $15 billion compared to $3.8 billion foreign aid, which is actually investment, that's pretty good 400% return on investment. That's only one CIA. To be objective, it's a few CIAs. We are easily above 1,000%, to which we have to add the mega $billion of exports, the mega $billion saving of research and development, the expansion of employment, the billions of dollars of income tax revenues. We're talking about the best ever or the highest ever return on investment of any American investment. And last and not least, there is the location of Israel. We are located in a very critical area between the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, Indian Ocean, Persian Gulf, between Europe and Asia and Africa. This is an area, as I mentioned, which is the epicenter of anti-American Islamic terrorism, which is like an octopus spreading its tentacles all the way to the U.S. Soil. We are talking about an area with 48% of global oil reserves, and while this country is more or less independent as far as oil, but still the price at the pump is determined to a large extent by the access to Persian Gulf oil. Certainly, that region of the world is a major intersection for trade, shipping lanes, trade between Far East and the Western world. And if we go back to the early 1980s, General Alexander Haig, who was Supreme Commander of NATO and then Secretary of State, he resembled Israel to the largest American aircraft carrier, which cannot be sunk, deployed in the most critical region, and doesn't require a single American on board. And if there would not be Israel, he said, then the U.S. would have to manufacture a few more real aircraft carriers, deploy them to the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean, accompanied by 6 or 7 ground divisions. If you put that again in monetary terms, you find out that today, to manufacture a top-class aircraft carrier, it costs anywhere between $10 and $13 billion. Namely, one aircraft carrier already yields about 340% return on investment, and certainly what Israel has performed militarily is way more than 1, 2, or 3 aircraft carriers, as again we saw in June, but not only in June. We saw that before, when Israel, about a year and a half ago, eliminated many of the leaders of Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon and Syria, it caused a transformation of power in Syria, which opened the door for the U.S., hopefully, to replace Russia in Syria. And again, no other ally of the U.S. could have performed such a service for the U.S. And if you go further back, 1981, when we destroyed the Iraqi nuclear reactor in defiance of US pressure, and we were punished by the US after we did that, suspending supply of combat aircraft, suspending series of defense cooperation, and it took the US 10 years to admit publicly that it was a very, very bombing which contributed to American interests. And that was an event in Washington, D.C. The keynote speaker was Dick Cheney. Philip here attended that event when the first sentence uttered by Dick Cheney, then Defense Secretary, was, "Thank you, Israel, for destroying the nuclear reactor of Iraq back in 1981, which spared us, the US, potential nuclear confrontation in 1991. How many trillions of dollars were spared by that one Israeli action? How many thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands lives were spared due to that Israeli operation?" And again, no other ally of the US could have done that. And one can go on and on and on, but I heard from Pastor Robbie that you're not serving breakfast here, so we'll have to stop here. Hopefully you have some comments, questions, your own views, which I would welcome. That's what I suggested. Yeah, here Pam wants to ask.
Given the recent coalition of the different Kurdish groups with the SDF, what are the implications for Israel and the United States?
Now, which coalition?
The Kurds came, several different Kurd groups came
Oh,
together to create a coalition that they've gone into alliance with the SDF. I mean, I know why they did it, but what are the implications for Israel and for the United States?
well, I would say overall, the policy towards Syria, in my mind, is not very, very realistic. I also hope that the new leader of Syria is indeed a terrorist becoming pragmatist. I hope so. But I cannot understand why showering upon him so many gifts before he convinces the inhabitants of Syria, neighbors of Syria, US, that he indeed is a pragmatist. I think the logical way to do it would be to register with him the attempt to normalize relation and to shower upon him many gifts and suspend all economic sanctions, provided that he can produce evidence that he indeed is a pragmatist. For instance, he should uproot all elements of hate education from Syrian curriculum. All anti-infidel, anti-US, anti-Israel, anti-Western must be uprooted. He must do the same thing as far as the Friday sermons in the mosques. And certainly, he has to disavow publicly any affiliation he had, any impact that he absorbed of the Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any Islamic terrorism ideology. Once he delivers those elements, I would be all for showering him with many, many gifts. At this stage, he hasn't done it. And the reason he hasn't done it primarily, as far as I know, no one preconditioned gestures upon doing just that. And by the way, it begged the U.S. to do just that based on recent precedent. Bashar Assad, who was toppled as a result of the Israeli operation in Syria and Lebanon against Hezbollah, Bashar Assad came back to Syria after the death of his father, Hafez Assad. And Bashar Assad arrived to Syria from London, where he practiced as a very successful ophthalmologist. He arrived to Syria and was right away, showered upon compliments from leading Americans in the House, in the Senate, in the administration. And the reason was supposedly very clear. He spent time in England. He speaks a number of foreign languages. He was the president of the Syrian Internet Society. He was married to a British-educated Syrian lady. Well, those are supposedly qualifications for moderation. But we found out that we cannot afford to be so gullible because, as I say, the proof is in the pudding. He revealed himself to be more ruthless butcher than his father, who was also a ruthless butcher of his own. We had the same precedent by Yasser Arafat, who in 1993 decided to start singing peaceful songs. Few reckless Israeli leaders absorbed it in a very, very enthusiastic manner. US President at that time, Clinton, joined them as well. And very quickly we realized that he has remained the same Yasser Arafat. And again, it goes back to ideology, which is much more significant in the Middle East than any financial or diplomatic bonanza. Westerners assume that money talks, and therefore the current leader of Syria, Bashar Assad, Arafat, since money talks, they are going to let go of their ideology. They fail to realize that in the Middle East, it's not money that talks, but it's ideology that walks. And this has been at least the reality of the Middle East for the last 1,400 years.
We're going to need to stop at this time. We've got to let people go. So sorry about that, but you can ask him afterwards. But we need to close things down because some people need to get back, get their sleep before going to work tomorrow. But thank you very much. And I didn't get to ask you the question that I wanted to ask you, but we'll have to wait on that. And but I'm going to ask. I want a quick answer, because a lot of folks don't know about a number of the very good YouTube videos that are out there from various pro-Israel organizations, Jewish organizations, and I'm talking about Emmett Online and Tikva and a number of others. So, and you have YoramEttinger.com. You can go to his page. So what would you recommend as one top source of information, contemporary information in Israel?
As the pastor said, there are many good ones. I cannot think about anyone who is the best, but there are many good ones. I will share with you the link to my own articles, not because it's the best, but that's what I can pull off right now, and it's called The Ettinger Report, Ettinger with double T, theettingerreport.com, and there you have articles and videos, presentations on different aspects of U.S.-Israel relations, different aspects of U.S. policy in the Middle East, different aspects of Iran. And just as an example, earlier this morning, I shared with my subscribers an article, a brief article on the Qatar education under the assumption that there's no more authentic reflection of one's worldview than the education which you instill in your members of the family or as a leader in the public of his domain. And when you read a recent study, and I happen to know the organization that carried out that study, you realize the huge difference between the image of Qatar and the reality of Qatar, which has sustained its hate education, anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, generally anti-infidel promotion of martyrdom, promotion of suicide bombing, while receiving very, very warm embrace by Western governments. So that's one of many such examples. But again, I want to make it clear, I don't pretend that mine is superior to any other. You'll find many, many good resources also in this country as well as in Israel.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Yoram. It's always great to have you here. And hopefully next time I see you, it'll be in Israel, but I'll probably not be there till the end of October, so I'll see you back here before then. Okay, y'all are dismissed.